Welcome to the Cornerstone Podcast produced by Global Grace Ministries. I am your host, Francis Wesso, always happy to spend some time with you. This is the first episode of our series entitled Habits of a Mature Christian, where we will be discussing some of the habits of a child of God who's striving to be more like Christ every day. According to the Webster's Dictionary, a habit is defined as an acquired mode of behavior that has become nearly or completely involuntary. In other words, a habit is something we do so often and naturally that it becomes a second nature to us. As a child of God, you have two main purposes in life: to be a disciple maker and to allow the Holy Spirit to transform you into someone more like Christ each day. Everything else you should do stems from these two life purposes. If I may share my opinion, I firmly believe that if you strive to be more like Christ every day, you will naturally become a disciple maker. Ephesians 4 verses 13 through 15 tells us, "Till we all come into the unity of faith and of knowledge of the Son of God, unto the perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carry about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive, but by speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ." Paul in these verses encourages us to seek growth and maturity until we fully embody Christ in all aspects of our lives. It is important to note that when Paul speaks of the stature of the fullness of Christ, he's not talking about Jesus' physical height. In fact, we don't even know how tall Jesus was during his time on earth. In life, once we reach out our physical limit in height, we can no longer grow taller. Instead, Paul here is addressing our emotional, intellectual, and spiritual maturity. He's speaking about our character, the essence of who we are. Regardless of our age, there is always more we can do to achieve this type of growth. Physical growth is automatic to a certain extent, but emotional maturity requires intentional effort. In this series, we will discuss 8 habits of a mature Christian and how to develop these habits. Today, we will focus on the first habit: total and absolute dependency on God. For mature Christians, reliance on God should be a habit, a second nature. But how do we cultivate this habit? To develop any habit, we first need to understand what it is that we want to make a second nature. We must know why we want this habit, how to acquire it, and have a way to track our progress toward achieving it. We also should be able to show progress. With that in mind, let's unpack habit 1, total dependency on God. What is total dependency on God? Proverbs 3:5 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight." When we depend completely on God, we are fully and absolutely submitted to his will for our lives. One of the clearest examples of such absolute submission is Christ himself. As he faced the horrific suffering and impending sacrifice of his life, he expressed his desire for the cup to pass from him. Yet, he ultimately laid down his own will and chose to fulfill the will of God the Father. My friends, the only reason Jesus, as a man, could do this was due to his absolute trust in God. While God may not ask most of us to lay down our lives in the same way, Jesus expects each of us to take up our cross and follow him. The Apostle Paul referred to himself repeatedly as a bondservant of Christ. The term bondservant signifies a willingly committed servant. He willingly devoted himself as a slave to Christ. To fully depend on God, we must surrender our will to him. And the only way to do that is by trusting God with all our hearts. Trusting someone requires knowing that person and determining whether they are worthy of our trust. While many Christians profess to trust God, their true faith is revealed through their reactions in time of trial. For example, it is easy to say, I believe that God is a healer when we are healthy. However, it takes complete and absolute trust in God and His power to heal when one of our children is ill. Similarly, it is one thing to claim, I know my God has set me free from bondage of addiction, but it's another to rely on God for the strength to resist temptation in our own weakest moment. Many of us declare a trust in God's will when things are going well, but how much do we trust Him during challenging times? For instance, what happens when we lose our jobs close to retirement, knowing that many employers are reluctant to hire older workers? Do we still trust God? It is during challenging times when our faith is tested that we truly understand our level of dependence on God. We often don't realize how much we trust Him when life is going smoothly. Our maturity is revealed when we face hardships. It is in difficult moments that we recognize our spiritual maturity. Some time ago, I worked under the leadership of a man of God who loved the Lord with all his heart, but lacked experience in ministry. God sent me to assist him as his associate pastor. Though my role often felt more like a protector or an armor bearer than a typical associate pastor. After working with this ministry for about 3 years, the pastor decided to take a month sabbatical. He was emotionally and physically drained, and by that point he knew me well and knew that I was capable of leading the church in his absence. I knew this pastor well and was determined to serve God and protect this pastor's position while he was away. After a week of his absence, the former senior pastor of the church, who was unhappy with the direction we were taking, tried to persuade me to make changes that I knew my current pastor would not approve of. This former leader was quite influential, and I understood that refusing him could turn him into my adversary. However, I had given my word to my pastor, so I chose to do what was right and said no to the former leader. He never forgot my refusal, and a year later, when my boss resigned to pursue another ministry, the former leader took over the church. For no other reason than my previous decision, he fired me. My family, I gotta tell you that my decision to stand up to this leader came after a lot of prayer. I realized that if I had followed the former leader of the church's demands, I would have been disobeying God. I also believed that since my boss was aware of my actions and knew I hadn't betrayed him, he might have safeguarded my position in the church before deciding to resign. Unfortunately, he did not. You can't imagine how painful this situation was for me. I wasn't even given the chance to say goodbye to the congregation I have served for many years. My heart felt devastated, but I could approach the Lord with a clear conscience, knowing I hadn't sinned against Him. I won't lie and say it didn't take time to forgive both leaders, but I understood that I had no choice but to forgive them. So I put my trust in God, and by His grace, I was able to fully and absolutely forgive them. Now, let me share what God does when you trust Him. After I was let go of this ministry, He provided abundantly for me, allowing me time to rest. He enabled me to start my own nonprofit and placed me in a situation where I was paid to read, learn, and be restored. When He knew I was ready, He opened a door that only He could open, allowing me to engage in a ministry I truly enjoyed. This experience challenged me to learn new skills, which is, as many of you know, one of my favorite things to do. The season immediately after I was let go and before I began my new adventure was difficult, but I am grateful for it. This experience was essential for me to understand what it means to be a bondservant of God. While I can't claim to fully comprehend this concept, I do know and understand that I have a Lord. I understand what it means to say that Jesus rules my life. I realize that I no longer make decisions on my own. God makes decisions for me. This doesn't refer to everyday choices, of course, like what clothes to wear, but rather about significant decisions that will impact my life and the lives of those around me. Instead of making my own plans, I seek to understand God's plan for my life. In the past, I would tell God what I wanted, hoping and praying that He will allow me to pursue those desires or grant them to me. That approach is now behind me. I'm not saying that I don't have choices or that I can't do what I want. God will never take away our free will. However, depending on God means surrendering our will to Him completely. So how do we learn to be completely dependent on God? How do we develop the habit of checking in with Him before making decisions? How do we stop trying to make plans and figure out what comes next in our lives and instead ask Him what He has in store for us? I wish I could say that developing this habit is simple or easy, but I will be lying. If you know me, you know that I am a very independent person. Almost everything I have done in life, I have done it against the wishes of others because nothing in my life has been what most people from my culture consider normal. My mother hoped to have a daughter who dreamed of becoming a wife and a mother, who just happened to love medicine and wanted to become a doctor. There is nothing wrong with that life. It just wasn't what I wanted. I also grew up being told by my denominational pastors that I should not aspire to be a preacher because only men should hold that role. After I became a preacher, many denominational leaders discouraged me from pastoring simply because I was young and single. For most of my life, I have been serving God against the norm. I felt that this was what God wanted for me, so I pursue it regardless of the challenges. The only problem is that when you are young, healthy, and full of zeal, you often believe you can achieve anything by yourself. You make plans, share those plans with God, and begin to pursue them, all while hoping for His blessings. While that has always been God's will for my life, I come to realize that I could have achieved more, much more, if I had relied entirely on Him instead of combining my will with His. It has taken me a long and painful, challenging journey to reach that point where I won't pursue nothing, not even new relationships, unless I feel a clear sign from God. Nevertheless, I am grateful for the Holy Spirit who never gives up on us. He patiently taught me that by surrendering my will, I can live in harmony with God. My friends, when God is your Lord, He becomes your provider, protector, healer, and the lifter of your head. You may not get to choose your destination or the path to get there, but I promise you, He will take you to places you never knew existed. Once you relied on God, your abilities or lack thereof do not matter. If He wants you to be in a specific place or role, He will guide you there and He will open doors for you. When you no longer choose your friends, He surrounds you with people who genuinely care about your well-being. Even though they are human and capable of failing you, they do their best to bless you. You develop a habit by understanding what you want, what you wanted, and how to achieve it. With consistent effort, these habits can become second nature. If you want to depend fully on God, you must surrender your will to Him daily so that His plans for your life can be fulfilled. When you do this, God has promised to make your path straight. My family, we live in a broken world and face various problems, challenges, and difficulties. Not everyone you encounter is in your life to bless you, but the Bible tells us that we will experience tribulation. However, and this is a big however, when you trust in God and not rely solely on your own understanding, He guides your path. Do I always surrender my will to God? I wish I could say I do it 100% of the time. But what I can share is that a mature Christian strives to do it all the time. A mature Christian doesn't quit a job or apply for a new one just because they feel like it. They don't leave a marriage simply because they are tired of dealing with their spouse's shortcomings. To begin with, mature Christians understand that they do not choose their spouses. God does. In the past, I was one of the leaders who used to teach people how to create a 5-year or a 10-year plan for their lives. Now, my focus has shifted to daily plans. This doesn't mean I don't still plan for retirement or vacations, but for those, I see God's guidance on His plans for my life. Honestly, I can't recall the last time one of my personal plans actually worked out. More often than not, my plans led me to situations where I found myself needing God to rescue me. So now I only walk through the doors that God opened. I also ask Him to guide my steps daily and keep my spiritual eyes and ears open to clearly hear His voice daily. If I'm honest, there are days when it is extremely difficult not to follow my own desires. However, I am reminded of what Jesus told Peter in John 21. Most assuredly I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old or mature, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. Here Jesus was talking about Peter's future, but to me it tells me how I should live my life. While immature Christians do whatever they want to do, a mature Christian understands that they have an owner, a Lord. From my experience, I can confidently say that you will never regret to fully depend or trust in God. It may not always be easy, but it will always be worthwhile. You can tell you're making progress with this habit when you stop wasting time to merely share your plans with God and instead focus on seeking His will for your life. This shows that you are growing closer to Him. Additionally, if you no longer react negatively every time God prevents you from doing something you want and instead choose to wait and trust that He has a reason for saying no or making you wait, it indicates that you are taking significant steps towards spiritual maturity. I pray we all get to claim total dependency on God as a personal habit. Thank you for taking the time to invest in this chat with me today. Be sure to catch the other episodes in this series where we will explore the habits of mature Christians. God bless you.